Good morning, everybody. I think people are still logging in, so I'm going to give folks another minute. For those of you who are already here, welcome to the second Solutions for Congested Corridors Program Guidelines Development Workshop. If this is where you wanted to be, you're in the right place. And like I said, I think folks are still logging in, so I'm going to give it another minute or so, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, it is 10:03 in the morning. It is Friday, March 1st. So good morning and welcome to the 2024 Solutions for Congested Corridors Program Guidelines Development Workshop. You will hear us refer to the program interchangeably as program and SCCP through the course of this workshop. As a reminder, anytime we state we or us, we are referring to commission staff. Next slide, please, Ben. I am Naveen Habib. I manage this program, and I am joined today by Matthew Yazgat, who is the Deputy Director of SB1 Programs, to cover today's workshop. We also have additional members of our team joining us today to help us moderate this workshop, which includes Benjamin Williams. And in these workshops, we plan to review and amend program guidelines to prepare for the next program cycle, which is cycle 4. These guidelines govern how the program will be implemented, facilitated, and reported on, as well as how funds will be distributed to reimburse agencies for expenditures. All proposed changes to the guidelines will be shared and discussed during these workshops. And with that, we will move on to some housekeeping items. Ben, next slide, please. These workshops are intended to be an active discussion, not a lecture. That is exactly why participants are strongly encouraged to use the interactive features to share their thoughts at any time during the workshop. If you plan to make a comment or ask a question, please clearly state your name and your organization's name every time you make a comment. So in my case, that would be Naveen Habib from the California Transportation Commission. You may raise your hand or add a comment at any point during our presentation, and we will ensure all comments are addressed as received. If you have multiple questions, share them one at a time so that we may address each question in its entirety. And finally, as a reminder, your workshop registration link for Zoom and phone number are unique to you. Please do not share this information with other participants as it duplicates the same attendee and creates confusion for commission staff. I will pause here for any questions about logistics or anything I have shared so far. Okay, I don't see any questions or any raised hands. So I am going to move on to the next slide, please. Workshop agendas are posted up to 10 calendar days in advance of each workshop. Presentations and recordings are posted after each workshop on the Commission's workshops webpage and the program webpage. We will make recommendations based on the consensus reached throughout roughly 2 workshops. For timeliness, additional time on any topic may be limited to ensure all scheduled topics are covered during the allotted time for any given workshop. Similarly, previously covered topics may not be readdressed at subsequent workshops unless determined necessary. I will pause here again for any questions. Okay, I don't think I see any questions, so I will move on to the next slide, please. These are the topics we plan to cover during today's workshop, and with that, we'll go ahead and get started with a quick program refresher. On the next slide, please. So the Solutions for Congested Corridors program is a competitive program which was established in 2017's landmark legislation, Senate Bill 1. $250 million are appropriated annually from the state highway account to provide funding to regional transportation planning agencies, county transportation commissions, and the California Department of Transportation, also known as Caltrans, to reduce congestion throughout the state. Projects must be included in comprehensive multimodal corridor plans, also known as CMCPs, and regional transportation plans, also known as RTPs, to be eligible to compete for funds. The Commission encourages nominating projects that align with the state's climate goals, manage congestion through innovative strategies, include multimodal solutions, and advance transportation equity. Please note that the Solutions for Congested Corridors program only funds the construction phase of a capital project. On the next slide, you will see that since the first program cycle in 2018, the Commission has programmed 26 projects for over $2 billion in program funds, of which $1.3 billion have been allocated as of fiscal year 2022-23. Before we move forward, I am going to go ahead and recap February's workshop, but I will pause here for any questions or comments. Seeing none, I am going to move on to the next slide. As I said, we're going to go ahead and recap February's workshop, where we established that Cycle 4 will be a 2-year program spanning fiscal years 2025-26 and 2026-27. In addition to clarifying edits, reinforcing program requirements, there will be a greater consideration on workforce development, continued inclusion of medium-term Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure Strategies, also known as CAPTI, over the course of the next few program cycles of guidelines updates. And lastly, we'll continue to advance equity in our program guidelines to ensure we keep pace with community needs and consider equity throughout the project development, nomination, and selection process. To this end, we will host a standalone workshop to discuss the evolution and advancement of equity and community engagement criteria for all SB1 competitive programs on March 27th. I will come back to this item at the end of today's workshop. On the next slide, please. We also covered the proposed timelines for Program Cycle 4, as well as the 2024 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan guidelines. Please note this timeline is tentative and may be subject to change. If there are any changes, we will notify you as soon as possible through email and on the Commission's website. I'm going to pause here for any questions before I move on. Okay, I don't see any. On the next slide, please. So this was one of the most important items I covered and want to emphasize again from February's workshop. This process relies heavily on the discussions and feedback we engage in with you, our partners and stakeholders. In the last cycle, we had the privilege of engaging in discussions with several of you during workshops, office hours, and debrief sessions, where you shared your thoughts on how we can improve the next program cycle. In today's workshop, I plan to introduce some proposed updates based on your direct feedback. We hope you'll continue to engage with us through the course of this and the remaining workshops by sharing your insightful feedback. We will do our best to accommodate your suggestions. Next slide, please. Finally, in February, Associate Deputy Director Bridget Driller from the Commission's planning team discussed potential updates to the language addressing comprehensive multimodal corridor plans, or CMCPs, in program guidelines. As a reminder, CMCPs submitted in Cycle 4 must be prepared in accordance with the Commission's existing 2018 CMCP guidelines that you see linked here. Following Cycle 3, applicants will still be required to submit a CMCP self-certification form, which is linked here under the 2022 guidelines in Appendix B. So on the next section, so that was the recap. So I'm going to start covering some proposed updates. Here on this particular slide, you will see the proposed updates to Section 10 of the Solutions for Congested Corridors Program Guidelines. These are draft red line edits and may be subject to change based on additional review and feedback. Please remember that this presentation will be posted online, and we will follow up with a red line draft of the full text of guidelines at the next workshop, where these changes will be included for your review. As you can see, these are minor edits meant to clarify intent based on feedback we received directly from you. I will pause here for a little bit to give you an opportunity to absorb the change and provide any feedback. And I know it's a little bit small maybe for some of you, so don't worry, I will be sharing this presentation online and you can zoom in and really see the changes. But like I said, these are minor clarifying updates. Just because I think we got a lot of questions about, for example, the change that you see is we changed it from agency director to director of the agency that prepared the CMCP. And we also added it's not a new requirement. We're just emphasizing it. We're asking that you provide an active, publicly accessible link to the CMCP in the application that you're submitting to us. That will help us find it. Even if it's in the draft stages, if you give us a link, we'll be able to at least access it, which was not the case for a few of the applications we received last cycle. So we had to go a little bit back and forth to find it. So just clarifying edits. I don't see any questions or comments right now, but I'll pause again and give you a second to absorb the material and follow up if you have any questions or comments. So I have a comment here from Sarkis. I can say it here, or Sarkis, if you want to come off mute and say it yourself, that would be fine too. Let me know. And meanwhile, I'm also seeing Sona has her hand raised. So you should be able to talk now. You're unmuted, Sona.
Thank you, Naveen. Sona Babayan, LA Metro. So during the last workshop, there was a comment made that there will be slight changes also to the self-certification form. Do you have a proposed language to those changes, or it's not yet determined? Thank you.
Thanks, Sona. That's a great question, and I will answer it on the next slide because there were some changes to the self-certification form, and I want to share them with you. Meanwhile, I will say Sarkis is good with being on mute, so I'm going to say what he wanted to say, which was SBCAG supports the changes to Section 10, and we appreciate your consent. Thank you so much, Sarkis. Any other questions or any comments from anyone else? Sona, I will get to your comment just shortly once we move on to the next slide. Okay, seeing none, I think, Ben, we can move on to the next slide, please. So similarly, we have revised the CMCP self-certification form checklist, which you see here. Again, I know it's pretty tiny, but it's a longer list, so I tried to fit it in on the page, but I'm happy to share the presentation after the workshop and you'll be able to zoom in and really see it. Several items have been condensed or removed to reduce redundancy based on the feedback that was shared by you with our teams. And overall, this list has decreased from 19 to 15 items total. We have not changed the information that was required in the CMCP. We've just clarified it and condensed it, and we've removed any redundant items. So now I hope that answers your question. And then when we share the red line edits in April, you'll be able to see the exact changes that we made. It was just a little too messy when I made the image capture with the track edits. It looked kind of messy and hard to read. Great. Any questions about this particular item? Or any thoughts or any feedback? And like I said earlier, it is possible that this could be condensed further based on additional review and feedback. We could add additional description or information just to clarify the intent further, but this is what it looks like right now. Sona, I see your hand. Let me unmute you.
Thank you, Naveen. So sometimes I find myself trying to answer those questions and the answer would not pertain to a certain page, but would be found through the entirety of the plan itself. But you are specifically looking for a page number, correct? If I just say throughout the plan, it will be hard to identify where exactly, but it's like the demonstration of state, regional, and local collaboration. The plan we are now creating, the entire plan speaks about it. But I also want to make sure that I'm not missing any certain page in the plan and everything is captured for you to be able to qualify the plan as a CMCP. What would your advice be to make it easier for you to identify whether the certain question has been answered or not, even though the answer may be throughout the plan?
So I do have a response, but I see Bridget Driller from our planning team. She's on the line, and as the arbiter of this particular item, I'm going to go ahead and ask Bridget to speak to your question a little bit. Bridget, you're unmuted. Hopefully you can talk now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Naveen. This is Bridget Driller. I'm the Commission's planning team. And Naveen, we might be on the same wavelength, but having read a lot of plans the last couple cycles and reviewed the checklists, what I would ask is to be as specific as possible with page numbers. Sometimes for like the example you mentioned, Sona, like referencing a section can be sufficient. So when talking about collaboration with other agencies, there might be a section on engagement or partnerships that talks about those. Part of the reason why we ask for page numbers where possible is for things like identifying where a project is listed in a plan. We would sometimes get like a chapter as opposed to a page number, and then we'd have to do that digging ourselves. So just I would say be as specific as you can. Listing multiple page numbers or multiple sections is fine.
Yeah, I want to echo Bridget's comments. The more specific you are, the better it is. If you feel like the entire document complies, you can make that note within the self-certification form and then try to provide as many of those sections as possible that respond to that particular item on the checklist. Hopefully that answers your question, Sona.
Thank you. May I have another question as a follow-up?
Yes, it's why we're...
Would you consider adding another column for comments?
Yeah.
So instead of having yes or no on page number, a third column for us to be able to make clarifications so that there is no misunderstanding of what we mean or what we are referring to, in addition to providing sections, page numbers, chapters, and etc.
Absolutely, Sona. I think that's a well-received comment. We can certainly do that. The whole reason why we didn't initially provide it is because we didn't want it to just be another narrative space where people are adding in a lot of narrative. And we wanted to be able to be directed directly to where in the plan you want us to go read some things. So while I'm very comfortable adding a column called comments, I do want to advise everybody that when you're formatting your application, when you're responding to the checklist items, please use that comment space sparingly, only to discuss the caveat, like you're saying, Sona, and not to provide a very lengthy copy and paste narrative description of some sort, because that will allow our planning team to be able to go in and review the document much more quickly. So use the comment space for caveats is what I'm saying.
Thank you. And my last question on the self-certification form. For those items that say as applicable, NA would be fine if that's not applicable to our plan, or it's partially applicable to our plan. For example, one of the questions, I think those have been, that was about something about induced demand. So just to make sure that if it's not applicable and we say it's NA, that would be fine. And we wouldn't be subtract any points or anything.
So the CMCP checklist is more of a comprehensive document. It's not a point system. We're not giving points or taking them away. We're just making sure that the CMCP is complying with the 2018 guidelines that the commission approved. So that's one part. The second part is absolutely, if certain items are not applicable to your CMCP, you may say NA and since we're adding a comments column, you might also want to just explain, hey, we don't have anything that's responsive to this particular item on the checklist. That would be fine.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. These are good questions. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments or questions? And like I said before, we can always come back to items if you think of a question later on in the workshop. I'm happy to scroll back. Ben might not like it because he'll have to scroll back to a lot of different slides, but it's okay. We like Ben and we think he likes us, so it will be fine. I will move on to the next slide then, Ben, please. Thank you very much. In cycle 3, we expanded the congestion evaluation criteria to align with CAPDI strategy 1.1. The updates proposed here further emphasize the two distinct sections under congestion evaluation by sectioning them out as extent of congestion and then the proposed solution. This update is actually based on evaluator and stakeholder feedback. I wanted to say that the shared proposed updates on these slides so far provide you a glimpse into the types of changes that you can expect to see in the full red line draft guidelines. As you may be aware, cycle 3 was my first full program cycle, and it was my first time reviewing program applications that were submitted by all of you. So I did take heed from some of the applications that were submitted, and I really myself and a lot of the evaluators really liked applications where they kind of showed this breakdown of the sections that you see here, which was extent of congestion and proposed solutions. So I'm bringing it over into the guidelines themselves to help you better organize. Like I said, there's no substantive change here. It's more of a clarity and content change again. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it right now. I can pause for a second here. I don't see any questions or any hands raised. Ben, for right now, can we switch over to the 2022 SECP guidelines? Thank you. So I wanted to take a second and share the 2022 SECP guidelines with you. I know the page is a little bit larger. Maybe you can zoom into it a little bit so you can see the different evaluation criteria. I wanted to focus on maybe getting any feedback that you might have right now pertaining to any particular criteria, any language that we could possibly improve upon or provide an example on, or kind of anything that you would want to talk about, like, or see a change just as like clarifying edit. Like I said, we're not making a lot of substantive changes in this cycle's guidelines, but if you have any particular feedback, I'd be more than welcome to take it and see if we can incorporate it into the guidelines. I see Rick's hand is raised. Let me unmute you really quick.
Thank you, Naveen.
Yeah, I can hear you, Rick. Thanks.
Well, on the second bullet point, it says, how will the proposed improvements relieve congestion? And I noticed elsewhere that you've used the word mitigate congestion, which I think makes more sense than relieve congestion. Relieving congestion, unless we have congestion pricing on a highway, I think that's sort of that target that we'll never reach. Induced travel makes whatever we do sort of negates whatever we do to relieve congestion. So if you put mitigate congestion, that means you might be in your plan, you might be proposing alternatives to people being stuck in traffic. What do you think about that?
I think that's a fair point. If possible, I'm gonna see if Matthew can come off mute because I think we talked about this in the 2022 workshops, but I might be wrong. Matthew, do you have a second to come off and maybe talk a little bit about the mitigation question?
Naveen, I hope I'm audible. I had to switch to headphones. Okay. Yeah. Hey, Rick. I appreciate the suggestion. You know, I think that's a good one, and I think we can take it back. Off the top of my head, I don't know that we are entirely wed to saying improvements which relieve congestion, or if it makes more sense to say mitigate congestion. I understand where you're coming from, so. Because this is evaluation criteria, we'll probably take it back and just toss the idea around internally. But this is one that I think we can, I think we can make that switch. I, again, don't think we landed on the word relieve for any particular reason. And especially as you note, we say mitigate throughout the rest of the document. So I appreciate the comment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Any other thoughts or comments on congestion evaluation criteria? I see Jose Luis. Hold on one sec. Jose, you should be able to comment now.
Yes, hi. Let's be thoughtful on what words we use for congestion, reducing, mitigating, or relieving. I imagine that some places, I don't know, like downtowns, congestion is actually desirable and good. Um, it it's what makes you park your car and get out and walk around and do stuff. In other places like goods movement, congestion is bad. It means produce expires on the trucks. It does not get from its destination or from its origin to its destination quick enough. And in those cases, I'm not really interested in mitigating. I'm interested in relieving congestion or reducing congestion. So maybe an or, but not all of the congestion is the same, and not all solutions are the same.
Thank you for your comment, Jose. It's a point well taken. Any other comments? Jose, you still have your hand raised. Did you want to add to your comment? Oh, no, you put it down. Okay.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts or comments on this section or questions even? And then I can move on to the additional evaluation criteria, and I can start with safety and accessibility. If anybody has any comments or thoughts about any of those particular items, we can scroll to the next screen too, Ben, just so they can see. I think most of you are pretty familiar with the 2022 guidelines. I wanted to just take maybe a couple of minutes to scroll through some of the evaluation criteria because we'd received feedback that you would want some more additional information or comments, but there were more broad comments. So I'm trying to figure out if there's anything specific that anybody who's attending today wants to share about any of the criteria, anything that we could do to expand upon it. Like we just talked with Jose Luis and with Rick about the congestion evaluation criteria. If there's anything in the language that we could alter to make our intent clearer, anything like that would go a long way. So if you have any comments or thoughts or feedback, feel free to share it. And if you need maybe some time to go through it and bring it to the next workshop, that would be fine too. So just as a reminder, under additional evaluation criteria, we have safety, accessibility, community engagement, economic development and job creation and retention, air quality and greenhouse gases, efficient land use and housing, matching funds, deliverability, collaboration, and cost effectiveness. And I know I'm putting folks on the spot here because you might not have thought about this before you walked in today, or signed in today. So if you want to maybe come back with any suggestions or comments or email them to us, that's perfectly fine too. I just wanted to put it out there in case anybody had any specific comments or feedback on any of the evaluation criteria. Ben, I think we can switch to the presentation again, please. And like I said, if you think of anything that you have questions on, comments about, any suggestions, any kind of feedback, you can contact us. You can email us at secp@catc.ca.gov. And then mine and Matthew's contact information is also included in this presentation and on our website. And you can reach out to us anytime with any suggestions or comments. So I will move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Like I said, the Cycle 3 was my first full program, and it was my first time reviewing the project applications that were submitted by all of you. And I wanted to share some overall observations about the applications with you that I hope you will find helpful as you develop applications for Cycle 4. So like I said, we are trying to streamline our guidelines based on the feedback that you've provided to us. And the goal is for the updates that we're making in the guidelines to result in better organized and more easy to follow applications on your end. So to this end, we are recommending that you tell your story as directly and succinctly as possible. The project narrative should be contained to the nomination itself and limit use of additional appendices or external web pages for reference purposes and only where necessary. For example, if you're responding to the community engagement criterion, where you may want to share data or metrics about the types and frequency of engagement or your entire engagement plan with us, that could definitely be part of an external link or an appendices that you can share within the project application. The only reason why I'm suggesting limiting that use of those external links and additional appendices is because that requires evaluators to jump to another component within the application and review all of that information. So if there are any major updates that you want to share, put them in the narrative itself. And then if you still need additional space, like you absolutely have to share a big attachment or something like that, you can pop that into an appendix or an external link. The other thing is, I think one of the comments that we received from evaluators, including me going through the applications myself, is that all the applications are structured differently, which makes sense because all the people who are originating the applications come from different agencies, different backgrounds, and just think differently. Everybody is creative that way. I would suggest that you structure your application to match the order of the guidelines so that it's a little bit more organized. And so your information flows from the start to finish in the same way that the guidelines do. So that as we review your information or your project narrative, we're able to connect it back to responses within the guidelines and make sure that the questions we asked are being answered within the guidelines within the application. I think if it would be useful for folks, I can definitely create and provide a sample template that could help you visualize how to better organize your applications. I'm happy to do that. I can bring that to the next workshop and show it to you so you guys can see what it's like. I can also publish it online if you want to use the template itself or a version or derivative of it for your own purposes. I'm happy to do that. I see a comment from Angel. Did you want to come off mute, Angel, or did you just want to do the Q&A? Oh, thanks, Angel. I can say your comment on here. Angel said a sample template would be fabulous. Great. I would be happy to provide the template. I can put it together and provide it to you, hopefully by the next workshop, so you guys can see kind of what I'm talking about. And yeah, really happy to do that for you folks. And like I said, you wouldn't have to be constrained to the template itself, but if you can follow it, that would be great. Follow the order of things, that would be awesome. And one of the things that I'm adding in, and I will clarify this in Appendix A where we lay out the system for for the project nomination itself. I will clarify it, but one of the things that we're going to be asking applicants to do this time around is provide a linked table of comments, a table of contents, comments, sorry. I'm like doing the workshop and thinking of comments right now. We're going to ask that you provide us a table of contents at the start of your application so that we can scroll through your application, go back and forth between different sections and items, because there's a lot of great content, but as you are well aware, when you're developing these applications, they are fairly lengthy documents, and just scrolling through them endlessly, sometimes when you're just trying to find a very particular section, can become very exhausting. We are not as familiar with your applications as you are because you developed them. We're looking at them from a reviewer evaluator perspective. So it would help us a lot if we can actually just be able to like click through to jump through a specific section from the start of the document instead of having to endlessly scroll through it to find content. So that's one of the changes that I'm going to request. And like I said with Angel, I will be happy to provide a template. Any other thoughts or questions or any feedback? Rick, I see your hand raised. I think you can unmute yourself.
Thanks, Naveen. Yeah, I'm noticing that this is back on the guidelines, and I'm just reading through that, and it seems there might be a little confusion with, there's a section called eligible projects, and there's a list of things that, starts with addition of high occupancy vehicle lanes and managed lanes. Those are projects eligible for funding under the program. But elsewhere, it also, also says that, projects need to demonstrate reductions in vehicle miles traveled. And generally, if you're adding an HOV lane, you're going to increase vehicle miles traveled because it's not HOV all day long. And generally, there's more cars on the road with that. So I'm wondering if you might want to, add some language just to clarify that, if there is going to be a project application that if that's a HOV project, that it needs to comply with, CEQA regulations that require mitigation for increases in VMT.
Thanks for the comment, Rick. I just wanted to say we do have the CEQA. So projects have to complete CEQA and NEPA in order to be programmed within the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. I understand the need for clarifying that perhaps. I think the section you're referring to is under congestion evaluation criteria, where it says solutions that include the following will be better prioritized for funding. And at the end of that, we say highway solutions that improve transit travel times and reliability, or generate revenue to fund projects that reduce vehicle miles traveled through employing vehicle demand management strategies. I think that's what you're referencing, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's offered as an example of something that we will better prioritize for funding. It is not to preclude any projects from competing, but I saw Matthew came off mute, so I'm going to pause real quick and let him comment.
Yeah, no, thanks, Naveen. Actually, you were handling responding to Rick's question very well. I think the only piece I was going to add for your context, Rick, was what might not be abundantly clear in the guidelines, but is embedded in the guidelines, is actually a form that we require applicants that are going to be doing projects or implementing projects that will impact the state highway system. They must fill out this form and ultimately get Caltrans concurrence, or, quote unquote, Caltrans approval to proceed with the project, which I believe in terms of what you're referring to, like a VMT mitigation plan, if a project will induce demand, I understand is one of Caltrans requirements for projects that will impact the system. And obviously, my understanding is that those rules apply after Senate Bill 743 went into place, and that has actually been integrated into projects that we get that are clearing the CEQA milestone after the point that 743 was passed. So that it's not explicitly clear in this section for the purpose that Naveen mentioned. We're not precluding HOV or managed lane projects from competing, and they've been competitive in this program in the past. However, you know, if VMT mitigation is deemed necessary, applicants will have to demonstrate how they're doing that, and ultimately following through this form that we require is signed off by Caltrans. So I hope with Naveen's response and my response, I hope that clarifies the.
Yeah, thank you. That's good to know. Thank you, Matt.
Hi, Matthew. This is Angel. And hi, everyone. This is Angel Pyle with the department. For those that don't know me, I'm the Senate Bill 1 program manager with Caltrans. So Matthew, you're spot on. I would add one clarification. So this form is the state highway system impact form, and from the department's perspective, you know, every project is individual. We're not issuing any sort of like SB1 competitive program wide sort of additional criteria. So each project will be evaluated individually, and the form is more of a Caltrans acknowledgement. It's not necessarily an approval or support or anything like that. So I know on a future workshop, I think the form will probably be covered, and we can certainly go over it in more detail at that point in time. But I just wanted to provide one clarification that it was more of an acknowledgement, not necessarily one of approval.
Angel, I appreciate that. That's why I was doing air quotes. You can't see me. I'm not on camera. But yes, that if we're gonna get into semantics, I think the difference between those two words is very, very important in this context. It's an acknowledgement. It is not an approval. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, thank you both for responding to that comment. And I'll also say, Rick, thank you for bringing up that question, another good one. And if you actually go to the 2022 SCCP guidelines, the absolute last page of that entire document is Appendix G, which includes the reference State Highway System Project Impact Assessment Form. I've also just put it in chat for everybody and linked it. And if you just scroll absolutely down to the absolute last page of that document, you can see it there. And Angel, I still see your hand up. Did you have anything additional to add?
Oh, sorry, my bad. I think I'm used to Teams where it automatically lowers my hand. So sorry, I'll lower it.
Oh, no, totally okay. Just want to make sure nobody has any additional comments. This is really great, by the way. Thank you so much to the folks who are coming off mute or putting in items into the Q&A. We really appreciate the feedback. These are good items for us to take back and think on. So really, really happy right now with all the feedback. If there are no additional comments right this second, I can move on to the next slide. Once Ben is ready. There we go. Thank you, Ben. And I'm going to cover frequently asked questions that I have compiled based off of what I heard in the last cycle, based on questions I've received in the inbox, from newer folks, from folks who are new to the program or are familiar with it, but just wanted some reinforcement. I'm going to go ahead and read these aloud for reference purposes only, just so if you have these questions, you know they're there, but they're also included in the presentation, like a takeaway packet, so you can have it on you. I'm also happy to respond to any questions that may arise leading off of these questions as well. So on this particular slide, these are the general FAQs that we've received time and again. So the first one reads, can projects that previously competed for program funds compete again? Yes, absolutely. SCCP is a competitive program. All eligible applicants with eligible projects are invited to compete for program funds. In terms of the next question, can program funds be used for other project phases? SCCP funds only funds the construction phase of a capital project. Program funds cannot be used to supplant other committed funds, and they cannot fund any cost increases on any project phases. The next question on here is, does SECP fund segments of larger projects? Yes, these types of projects have competed successfully in past funding cycles and may continue to compete again. I will make a specific note here for larger projects. When you're completing the applications for larger projects that have multiple components under them, the most successful applications in the past have been those that not only speak about the project comprehensively, but also drill down into how each component meets the program requirements and why it deserves to get funding. So people go about it different ways. Certain applications will section out each of the different components and address the program requirements within those sections. A lot of other applicants go around a more comprehensive approach. They'll talk about it overarchingly for the entire parent project and then specify which of the components best address that particular program item or criteria. It is really up to you how you want to tell that story, but those are two of the most common ways I've seen folks split it up in their project applications. I see a Q&A. This is from Michelle Smith. She said, hello, just to make sure we understand, a project can compete again if it was not already funded with SCCP in previous cycles, correct? Yes. In fact, you are not precluded from competing if you have been awarded funds in a previous cycle. So say in cycle one, you came in as a project applicant A. And project applicant A put in an application, competed successfully, got funds. And then maybe it's part of a really large project that's ongoing for like 20 years. And you got funding for one segment, but now you want to come in and ask for funding for another segment, segment 5 of this project. You can come back and compete in a future cycle for funds. If you're an applicant that competed in cycle 1, but was unsuccessful, competed in cycle 2, was unsuccessful, and maybe competed in cycle 3 and was unsuccessful, you can still compete again in cycle 4. And we're happy to meet with you. We're happy to offer any technical assistance or guidance that we can to help you put together your application as best as possible or answer any questions you might have so that you may compete. I will note this is an increasingly competitive program, and it does continue to get more and more applications with each new cycle, or larger and larger projects compete in each subsequent cycle. So it is, I will note the caveat that it is a very competitive program. And as much as we would love to give everybody all the money in the world, we are limited, constrained to the $500 million benchmark that we have. Sona, I see that you have your hand raised. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you, Naveen. I'm really glad to hear that we can come back and compete for another element or segment of a project that was previously submitted and succeeded in getting SCCP funds. But at the same time, I am a bit confused on the guidelines, which I think say that the project has already committed state funds, being SCCP, TCEP, STEEP, or ATP, can't compete, won't be eligible for the SB1 grant. So could you please clarify that language? Because I have a project that we submitted last year, and we were successful in getting SCCP funds for an element of a bigger project. And now I'm thinking about another element of the same project to go after the SCCP funds. So per your comments, I will be able to do so, but at the same time, I'm confused that fine line between projects that already have committed state funds being eligible or not for the future cycle 4 grants. I'm sorry if my question was confusing, but
it is not confusing at all, Sona. I think I understand what you're asking, but feel free to correct me if I don't respond as, to your question that you intended. Maybe that would be a better way to put it. So Sona is asking, say in cycle 1, we go back to our original example. Cycle 1, applicant A put in project, and the project had, say, 3 segments within it, and segments 1, 2, and 3. Now applicant A was awarded funds. They are putting it in construction. They're already implementing that project. Now they come back in cycle 3 and project applicant A is back to ask for more funding. Parent project is the same, but the segments under it are segments 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and 6 have never been funded under SCCP and therefore are eligible to compete for funding again. Are not again, sorry. They're eligible to compete for funding for the first time. However, if applicant A had come back in cycle 3 and said, oh, hey, we got funds back in cycle 1 for segments 1, 2, and 3, and now I'm coming back to ask for more funds from SCCP for segments 1, 2, and 3, we would not be able to fund that project because, like I said before, SCCP does not fund cost increases. So there is that caveat related to SCCP particularly. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much. So it refers to the cost increases, but not the rest of the elements that haven't been previously funded. That is really great news to hear. Thank you so much, Naveen. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
you're very welcome. And if you go back, if you're a curious applicant or if you're a new applicant, you can go back and look at the project applications that we funded in cycles 1, 2, and 3, and you will notice that you will see there's not a lot of them so far because, like I said, we're still a somewhat nascent program. We're going into cycle 4, so there's only 3 cycles that we funded so far. But you'll see there are fairly large projects with several segments, and we understand that some of these are like 15, 20-year long projects, right? And some of them are closing up, some of them are in the middle of construction and implementation. But I think that's what that hopefully answered your question, and we're good there. And if you have any follow-ups, Sona, let me know. Happy to respond to that. I do see a comment, and I think Matthew will probably have to address this one. He's our performance metrics person. So Deborah Redmond's comment is, we are proposing a rolling stock project and have developed a customized BCA tool that is relevant to the commuter rail system. We would like to propose this as an alternative. Okay, relevant to out commuter rail system. We would like to propose this as okay, Deborah, thank you. I will restate the comment because I have butchered it now. So we are proposing a rolling stock project and have developed a customized BCA tool that is relevant to our commuter rail system. We would like to propose this as an alternative to the California Life Cycle Cal BC parameters. Do we need prior approval to do that? Would you like us to submit both tools?
You do not need prior approval. So I think we only have required metrics, but we don't necessarily require the tools and the methodologies that our applicants utilize to develop those metrics, as long as you can explain your rationale for not using one of the tools that we offer. Since you are referring to a tool that is similar to the Cal BC, it might be worthwhile to provide the outputs for using both tools, and then state the preference for why you're using your own tool and why that's maybe more conducive or more appropriate for your type of project. We understand that Cal BC does not have we've heard that Cal BC does not loan itself equally well to each, correct, it's not rail friendly, to each type of project. So in your instance, I would absolutely suggest go ahead and use your own tool, as long as you can justify and explain your agency's use of it. But you do not need to seek our approval to utilize other tools. And I think if I can figure out how to use the chat function, I'll also drop in our performance metrics guidebook link, which is something that we developed last cycle to kind of outline our process for how we assess performance metrics and approach them, so that our applicants have kind of a bit of a toolkit that they can use, or at least a document that they can point to that kind of rationalizes how we're treating these. So thank you for the question. That's a very good question.
I just shared the performance metrics guidebook link directly in the chat with everyone. Hopefully folks can see it and refer back to it. Deborah, that was a really good question. Thank you for asking it. I'm going to wait here and continue reading my FAQs because that seems to have prompted other questions, which is great. So I think I see another question actually. Angel Pile wants to know if there is specific feedback about CalBC. Caltrans would like to hear it. I'm happy to receive that feedback and pass it on to the CalBC team. Thank you very much, Angel, for making that offer. I have put your comment in the box so that everybody can see it.
And I'll just say, Angel, I appreciate that, and I do want to be sensitive. I don't think that the comment that that we received was being critical of the CalBC. However, we have heard that it can be complex trying to apply that tool to rail projects, and I don't think that that's surprising for anyone who has used the CalBC. So it's just kind of a nuance, if you will.
I don't see any other questions right now, so I'm going to go back to the general FAQs. We had just addressed, does SCCP fund segments of larger projects? And we had a little bit of a discussion about that. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is, can the California Life Cycle Benefit Cost Analysis, or BCA, be submitted in its original Excel format? Yes, absolutely. In fact, for cycle 4, we are recommending submitting the original Excel file to us. That would be great. It does help in the evaluation portion. So if you can share the Excel file, please do. The next question is, will the commission accept letters of support for projects? Yes, letters of support are accepted after the project nomination due date. So for example, in cycle 3, the project nominations for SCCP were due December 2nd. You can start submitting letters of support as early as December 3rd. And applicants may send all of the letters to SCCP for SCCP projects to scccp@catc.ca.gov, and all the letters should be received before program adoption at the June 2025 commission meeting. I want to know if there are any questions related to any of these FAQs stemming off of them. Sona, I see your hand up. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Naveen. So just to clarify, you only accept the letters of support after the application due date? Those can't be attached to the application itself prior?
Those are the letters of support that are included with the application. This particular question is related to if we'll accept them.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
So, no, that's a good question,
Mhm.
Sona. It's a valid question because there are agencies that will write letters of support or individuals who will after your agency, the nominating agency, has already submitted a project. So that's who that's for.
Okay, I have a follow-up question on that. So I understand that you would like us to send them to the specific email address, but what about having a link in the application itself where once we receive those letters of support after the due date, we can just incorporate in the link and not send emails so that you are not bombarded with a lot of emails, and so that you can go and check that link in the application, see which what kind of new letters of support are submitted after the due date.
That's a good idea. The only problem is because we accept applications through the SCCP mailbox, the general mailbox. That's where you submit applications by the nomination due date. It's a very technical caveat, but it will seem like we're making an exception to allowing an application to be amended after it has been submitted to us, even if it's just letters of support that are being added into the application. The second thing, the reason why we would prefer to be directly emailed letters of support is because we filed those away. They're like comment letters that we refer back to when we do program adoption. We are required to publish them along with the amount of letters we received, a summary of the content. So there's like a whole process that we undergo as a public agency. I see Matthew came off mute. Maybe he has something additional to add.
No, Naveen, that was going to be my response exactly. If there's a link that could contain additional information added after the deadline, Sona, it could imply that we're kind of being fed information after the deadline. But because comment letters regularly come in after the deadline, and we understand, elected officials and organizations and nonprofit groups typically have a bit more need more lead time to get comment letters, and that's why we do accept them after the fact. The third reason, which I think is quite an important one that I don't know if Naveen mentioned, when it comes time for us to make our staff recommendations, letters of support become, I'm not going to say they become the weight that tips the scale, but then they become posted with our book item. And so that's another reason to submit them. And actually letters of support that are sent to us kind of in relation with respect to our staff recommendations, it would be very important to make sure those get in front of us. And so that's why I would suggest, don't be shy to send us an email. You can send it to our general CTC email, which is how we traditionally get any comment letters or letters of support for anything that ends up on our agenda. It'll just make sure that it stays in front of us. So for the same purpose that Naveen mentioned, and we wouldn't want to miss them by any means.
Sena, hopefully that answers your question, unless you have a follow-up.
I have a follow-up, not regarding the letter of support, but evaluation criteria and also commission staff, decision on the applications. So going back to the evaluation criteria on the matching funds, from cycles 1 to 3, although providing matching funds is not a requirement for the SCCP grant program, however, would you say that the amount of matching funds provided for the application has any correlation with the success of the project to receive SCCP funds? 20%, 30%, 60%. I just want to understand whether there is a ceiling, whether there is any lower point we can go with the match funds. And again, taking into consideration that you don't require, but also what would identify the success of the project?
It's a good question, Sona. So we, like Sona said, I want to clarify for everybody, the SCCP does not require that applicants come in with matching funds for their project applications. That is just base fact. In terms of your question, you're not going to like the answer. It depends. We don't look at applications just like, it's not a quantitative analysis where like you get a point for this and then a point for this, and then we tally up the points and you get funds. It doesn't work that way. It's more of because your project applications are qualitative narratives where you talk about the project outputs, the benefits, and you provide a story, a regional story, a community story about your project. We take all of the application into consideration before making a final determination about whether to fund a project or not. Sometimes, because like I said before, it's a very competitive program and we do get a lot of applications and a lot of really great applications. It's possible that like certain criteria that are weighed, like so congestion evaluation criteria is obviously like the intent of the program to reduce congestion, is weighed a little bit heavier. We focus maybe more on that, but in terms of matching funds, as far as I'm aware, based on my cycle 3 evaluations, I'm not aware that we were like partial to a project or impartial to a project because of the amount of matching funds provided. We do, however, know that a lot of these projects that are larger projects do have to leverage funds from several different sources. So we do want to make sure that all of that funding source and the timelines and everything matches up so that the project actually goes to implementation at some point. Matthew, I saw you come off mute. Do you want to add anything?
Naveen, I think the only thing I would add is that, and you're absolutely correct. We don't have like a scientific point-based evaluation system. But to answer Sona's question, we do consider additional funds to leverage the funds that you're requesting from us. And I think the reason I'm only adding this information onto what you said, Naveen, is because I've gotten this question a lot historically. And I think to offer some insight, I would say projects that don't provide any local funding and are asking for 100% of the project cost out of SCCP are going to be less competitive in that one criteria among each of the criteria in the SCCP program. Projects that can demonstrate they're putting in some portion of funding, maybe you mentioned 10%, 20%, 60%. Let's say your project is worth $100 million and you're asking for $50 million from SCCP and you're putting in $50 million in measure funds. I would say that's a pretty good sweet spot in terms of you're demonstrating your local ability to leverage funds for what you're asking for. And so in that particular criteria, that project will be competitive, more competitive, potentially most competitive. But to Naveen's point, then it gets considered with the other evaluation criteria. So putting in a one-to-one match isn't going to guarantee any particular project will get funded, but it's certainly going to help it.
Yeah, I think Matthew's description really hit it on the head. It's competitive across each different evaluation criteria. So that's a really apt way to put it. I think I'm going to move on to the next slide. Feel free to keep those questions coming. I just wanted to cover another FAQ that we received. So Ben, if we can go to the next slide, please, that's great. So this is a timely use of funds specific slide, because there are a lot of questions around this and a lot of confusion sometimes. So I want to cover it for some of our newer attendees and maybe some of our experienced participants as well. The question I've posed here is, what is the fund schedule for projects programmed in the 2024 program cycle for? So the 2024 program covers fiscal years 2025, 26, and 2026, 27. That's 2 fiscal years. Allocations must be requested in the fiscal year in which the funds are programmed. So for example, a project that is programmed in fiscal year 25-26, agencies should request allocation by or before June 30th, 2026, before the end of the fiscal year. And I want to explain that it's not you have to do it by June 30th specifically. In this example, I've said that you have to come in with an allocation request by or before the June commission meeting, which typically is at the very end of June. But for this example's sake, I put June 30th, 2026. Then based on when your project is allocated, you have 6 months to award the contract from allocation. So if we're stemming off this example that I've provided, if your project was allocated on June 30th, 2026, your agency has until December 30th, 2026, 6 months after the allocation, to award the contract. And then once the contract is awarded, you have 36 months to complete the project from contract award. So if, again, we're going off of the example that I provided, if the project was awarded the contract on December 30th, 2026, the agency has until December 30th, 2029 to complete the project. Hopefully that made sense and is something that you can hold on to. I tried to make it visually appealing and provide an example so that you have this. For those of you who've been with us for a long time, you know that there are time extensions that are available in the event of an unforeseen circumstance. that hits your project. Typically, these are weather events, like, 12 atmospheric rivers in 1 year, that kind of unforeseen circumstance. So if that happens, we do have time extensions available in the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. Because we only fund the construction phase of a project, we offer time extensions for allocations. You can say, hey, I need some additional time to allocate my project. You can ask for up to 12 months. Then if you need additional time to award the contract, again, you can come in and request a time extension for 12 months, up to 12 months. It can be less than that, but it's up to 12 months. And then finally, you can also request a project completion time extension. So if you need additional time to complete the project and you're not going to meet that 36-month requirement, you have two options. You can ask for allocation. When you come in for the allocation initially, you can ask for a project completion extension within the allocation request. So you can say, hey, we already know this is going to take longer than 36 months. Can we ask for an additional 20 months to complete said project? So now you have a total of 56 months from when your contract is awarded to when you need to complete the project, 56 months. However, say you're reaching 52 months and the state's experienced, or your region of the state has experienced fires, or I don't know, hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever, some sort of extraordinary event that has further delayed your project, you can come in for a project completion time extension and say, hey, we might need another like 6 months on top of the 56 months we have already, bringing you to a total of 62 months instead. For the project completion time extension after the fact that you can come in for, that is 20 months. You can ask for up to 20 months there, not more than that. I covered a lot of information there. Again, all of this information is already included in our program guidelines from cycle 1, cycle 2, and cycle 3. Nothing is changing here. This is how we've always run it. It's our timely use of funds policy. But if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, feel free to let us know in the chat, in the Q&A, sorry. Raise your hand, or you can send us an email or comment on it any time that you want to. I just wanted to cover it because we do frequently receive questions about this segment of items. Ben, I think we can advance to the next slide. So this is the CMCP FAQ. Bridget Driller did an incredible job responding to all of these questions before, and she's the one who put these together. I added one question. I'm happy to run through them all again. We covered these in February, but since we're covering FAQs, I wanted to cover corridor questions one more time. Again, CMCPs are comprehensive multimodal corridor plans. Excuse me. If the corridor plan is in draft form during project nomination, should the agency submit a self-certification form for the draft plan? Yes, a publicly posted draft corridor plan on a functional and accessible web page is acceptable at the time of project nomination. All draft corridor plans must be final by program adoption. Does a corridor plan's title matter? No. It only matters that the plan is consistent with the Commission's CMCP guidelines. And for cycle 4, those would be the 2018 CMCP guidelines that are posted online today. Next is, this is a question I just added. Who should sign the CMCP self-certification form? It's an excellent question because I have made this edit for this cycle's guidelines to clarify it. The person who should sign the CMCP self-certification form is the director of the agency that prepared the CMCP. Hopefully that will solve some of your confusion around that from last cycle. Next question is, does the self-certification form need to be reviewed and approved by the Commission before finalizing a CMCP or submitting a project nomination? No. The CMCP self-certification form should be submitted with the project nomination. And finally, how often should corridor plans be updated? Corridor plans should be reevaluated at least every 4 years in air quality non-attainment areas and every 5 years in air quality attainment areas to determine if the plan is still valid or if regional changes necessitate an update. The corridor plan's lead agency may use its discretion to determine if a reevaluation is necessary. Excuse me. Any follow-up questions for CMCPs or any of the FAQs that I just shared here today? Don't see any questions or hands raised. So I think I'm going to move on to the next slide, please, Ben. Thank you very much. So, like I said before, we are going to be discussing advancing transportation equity in our upcoming SB1 program's Advancing Transportation Equity Workshop, which is going to take place on Wednesday, March 27th from 1 to 4 p.m. The registration link is embedded on this slide here. It's also available live on our workshop's webpage and the SECP webpage as well. It's in the save the date that we shared with you all over email. So you have multiple ways to get there. Register today. We hope you consider attending. We expect this to be a robust discussion, and we anticipate we will get some great feedback during that particular workshop. So we'll be sharing some ideas and thoughts. We'll be talking about it in detail, and hopefully everybody can make it. So I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Naveen. So I think it was yesterday or maybe day before, we saw that Caltrans also announced the Transportation Equity Index workshop, which will take place on March 20th, 2 to 3 p.m. And the Transportation Equity Index was also brought up during the Equity Advisory Committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. So I was wondering about the usage of this tool and whether it will be discussed during this workshop on March 27th. Thank you.
Matthew, did you want to address that one?
Yeah, no, that is a very good question. So we have been paying very close attention to the development of the equity index tool. And we will be, kind of tuning in. I shouldn't say kind of tuning in. We will be tuning in to the workshop that Caltrans will host on March 20th. And we are considering if the EQI will have a application in the SB1 programs in cycle 4. But we want to be respectful of one, the finalization of the EQI, 2, the amount of time that it would take for potential applicants to familiarize themselves with it and put it into practical use, and 3, with enough time for us to create guidance and requirements around its usage. And so I'm not going to say that we'll have it specifically on the agenda on March 27th, but we are considering having a follow-up equity workshop, potentially about a month and a half after the one that you see on your screen. And it would, if we hear a lot of interest or feedback on the EQI during the 27th workshop on the 27th, we will certainly take it back and work with our planning team, who's been kind of the lead at the commission and coordinating with Caltrans on that tool, so that we can bring it back for consideration. I would say at minimum, my thought is that we will reference the EQI in our equity supplement this cycle, and by referencing, meaning it could be used as one of the tools that applicants can use to demonstrate equitable outcomes or any of the key indicators that we outlined. But I don't see realistically it becoming the only tool that we would require or implement in cycle 4. I think the timing is just a little bit off. And as I said, we want to make sure that we're being fair to our applicants. We also know that that a lot of applicants to this program have recently submitted nominations to Caltrans to partner on projects. So we're kind of already in the middle of the cycle 4 process, even though we're still finishing guidelines. So this is a really long-winded way of saying it's not going to be a specific topic with a deliberately laid out process by March 27th, but we're open to considering it as things present themselves.
I hope that answers your question, Sona. If you have any follow-ups, let us know. Alrighty, so again, our Advancing Transportation Equity Workshop is on Wednesday, March 27th from 1 to 4 p.m. We really, really would like for you all to register, to attend, and take part in the discussion. This is an all SB1 program workshop, so our staff from SCCP, me, and TSEP and LPP will all be there. So we'll see you there. We'll be there with bells on, so you'll see us coming. Next slide, please. Thank you, Ben. So as a reminder, we are still scheduling office hours. So if you have not requested a session, please do so at your earliest convenience. Sessions are reserved on a first come, first served basis and do tend to fill up pretty quickly. We're fairly full, I feel like, for March and April, but we still have some spots available and we really encourage you to reach out. We would like to accommodate as many of the interested participants as possible. We understand that participating in the office hour sessions does not guarantee that a proposed project will be recommended for funding, so please do remember that. I have embedded a link to the request form on this slide, but it is also available on the program webpage. And sessions will begin this month, March 2024, and conclude in May of 2024. So you have March, April, and May, and you can request time during any of those months. So please do reach out if you have not done so already. If you would like to discuss a project or ask us any very specific questions related to your project needs. I don't see any questions or comments here, so I'm going to move on to the next slide, please. So in April's workshop, we hope to present and discuss a marked up version of the draft 2024 program guidelines. We do have some time left in this workshop, I think just about half an hour, and I am making an offer to stay on and respond to any questions as an informal open office hour session if you want to stick around and ask me questions. If not, I will not hold you hostage on a Friday. You can always email me or request a formal office hour session to discuss a project, but I'll be here because I'm scheduled to be here, and yeah, you're welcome to join me if you have any questions. All right. I don't see any. Oh, I do see Sona's hand up.
I'm so sorry. I've been asking too many questions today.
No such thing.
Thank you, Naveen. So about the topics to cover next time, maybe can we talk about the workforce development benefit? We've heard a number of times that there will be a greater emphasis on workforce development. So would you mind telling us what CTC will be, or what the commission staff will be looking for in these upcoming applications, so that we can talk more about it?
So we are planning to cover those particular comments and items during our equity workshop that I announced for March 27th. It kind of all goes hand in hand together. So that's where we will bring some of our suggestions and comments and hopefully open up ourselves to feedback from you all to understand what your limitations or ideas might be. Matthew, I saw you come off mute. Did you have anything to add?
Yes, I would say, so we have been mentioning workforce development and strengthening our guidelines and even, considering, not requirements, but asking applications for more information or potentially even evaluating it. I don't know that that's going to be specific to the equity workshop itself, but I know that it's something that we've heard from several of our commissioners that they would like to be stronger consideration in the SB1 program guidelines. So I don't have anything to point you to today, Sona. I would say our trade corridor enhancement program guidelines currently have the most substantial language around workforce development, workforce requirements. If you want to reference a potential direction we might end up going in the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, The language in the TCEP guidelines right now is specific to the installation of zero emission infrastructure for medium and heavy duty vehicles. But we're considering something similar in a way that makes sense for this program to evolve it in TCEP and might make sense in local partnership programs. So today, that's probably the best preview I could offer you. It's something that we're still working on, but stay tuned.
Thanks, Matthew. Sona, any follow-up or you're good? Okay, you're good. So I have a question from Steve Smith. This is not a guidelines question per se, that's okay. But can you say anything about which agencies may be involved in the evaluation of the applications or portions of the applications? Thank you for the info. Absolutely, Steve. So there are a couple of agencies that are involved in the evaluation process. There's us, the California Transportation Commission. We partner with Caltrans and we review the applications together. Typically, evaluators are chosen from all different branches, so planning, engineering, all of that. Everybody comes together and reviews all of the applications that were received. And then we have the California Air Resources Board, who reviews the air quality and GHG component of the applications and provides feedback. And then we have the California, it's HCD, California Department of Housing and Community Development. We call it HCD, so sometimes I forget there's a whole segment before it. So they evaluate the efficient land use and housing co-benefit in our guidelines, and so they then provide their feedback. And then now we have the Interagency Equity Advisory Committee, and they review the community engagement and accessibility criteria and provide feedback on that. Hopefully that answers your question. If you have a follow-up, please do let me know. And if you want just like a really short stream, it's the CTC, Caltrans, CARB, HCD, and the EAC. Lots of alphabet soups there.
Naveen, I'm gonna offer one tiny addition, only because I know Caltrans is currently evaluating SB1 projects. So we are very methodical in how we select our Caltrans colleagues to assist us on evaluations. We usually do, and this is, I'm just going to explain this process for transparency purposes because I'm not sure that we've explained it in the past. I usually work with Angel Pyle, the SB1 program manager at the department, and she will kind of blast out. It's almost like an internship announcement, if you will. And Caltrans will submit, for lack of a better way of saying it, applicants to evaluate SB1 projects, and then we'll review the Caltrans employees that seem interested. We'll check what we can in terms of conflict of interest, or if any of those team members might be involved in the Caltrans prioritization process, ensuring that we're really just hopefully selecting subject matter experts from Caltrans different divisions to really not just assist us, but enhance our process. I think, we could not implement these programs starting with evaluations and then program adoption and everything through allocation without Caltrans. So they are a key partner, but I can assure our entire audience that the selection process is very methodical.
And Steve had a follow-up. Thank you, Calsta. Is Calsta engaged in some way? Yes. We present all of our recommendations to the California Transportation Commission executive team, as well as Calsta's executive team, before the recommendations are brought to the commission and adopted as the final program of projects. Matthew, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I'll add. I mean, we still have a good amount of participants on, but this is what an open office hour is for. So at my level, Steve, I am also working with some of the deputy secretaries in CalSTA on guidelines development and not necessarily in project evaluation, but just ensuring that we kind of have visibility of all of the funding mechanisms currently available to our stakeholders. As you know, TARCP is a huge funding program that CalSTA and Caltrans implement. And so we are coordinating with CalSTA on programs like that so that we're not doubling up on funding or anything of that nature. So yes, the simple answer is yes, but we don't CalSTA is also a very small organization like the commission, and we don't currently have any CalSTA staff actively evaluating projects at the stage that we utilize support from Caltrans.
Thanks, Matthew. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? I'm going to go ahead and offer some closing remarks, but I'll still be here for open office hours. If anybody wants to stick around and has questions, I'll still be here. But I want to offer closing before more people jump ship. Just to let you know, if we could go to the next slide, Ben, please. Oh, yeah, there we go. So we recap the February workshop. We address proposed changes to the CMCP language and the CMCP self-certification form. We covered proposed changes to evaluation criteria and the appendices, and we discussed frequently asked questions. We will email to save the date for the next SB1 programs workshops later this month, so please keep an eye out for that announcement. I don't really have any action items besides the comments and the feedback that you provided. Thank you so very much for all of that. We have it all noted down. We will be checking internally and hope to bring some of that feedback into action in the revised red line that we will share in April. On the next page, you will see our contact information is provided there, and it's also available on the Commission's website. I have also embedded links that redirect to the SB1 programs and to the Solutions for Congested Corridors program webpage directly for your convenience. Feel free to contact us with any questions, comments, concerns anytime. We are here to help as best as we can. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Like I've said many times during this workshop and previous workshops, these workshops are only as effective as the people who participate in them, and you are always a very exceptional group. So thank you so much for being great participants. I hope you all enjoy a restful weekend. If you're planning on sticking around for open office hours, I'm here. Happy to answer any questions for you. If you are not planning on sticking around, I hope you have a really great weekend, and we'll see you at the next workshop, March 27th. And I see some folks are jumping off, so I'll stick around until there's only one of you left. Okay, and then there were 8. Anybody want to, or 6? But I think people are just hopping off. Maybe they were waiting around to listen to other people's questions. I don't know. Oh, and that's my phone. Folks who are sticking around, do you have any questions or comments or things you want to talk about? We're here to talk with you. If you have any specific project questions, happy to respond to them, or just general questions too.
Naveen, I am going to make the executive decision to say I think that the remaining attendees may be either have their speakers off or are doing something else. So I think we can call it.
Sounds good. Since I will just do one last call to see if anybody has any questions or comments, and seeing none, seeing no hands raised, I'm going to go ahead and call it. Thank you so much, Matthew, and everybody on the call for all your help. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you all next time. Bye.